Well, I think that the elites want to leave the Earth because there's a specific geological event that's possibly pending on this planet. There's been a lot of talk about Nibiru and Planet X coming back, but I don't particularly think that it's the actual Planet X that's going to cause the catastrophe. What I believe is that Planet X does exist, according to a lot of the ancient texts and tablets that I've read, and that possibly it's a brown dwarf star that's orbiting deep outside of the orbit of Pluto. And I also believe that there's actually a planet orbiting it that may be called Nibiru or may be the planet of the ancients. But what I feel is that this brown dwarf star is actually dislodging comets from the Oort cloud and sending them streaming into the inner planets. And this is something that we can't stop. I mean, if you take somebody who's not an expert at throwing darts, if they throw enough of them, eventually they're going to hit the bullseye.
The other thing that you see is that you see the military kicking off a series of programs. You see the Army goes out and comes up with Project Horizon to land, by 1962, to land 200 soldier astronauts, as they called it, on the moon and to build a permanent installation. Then you see the Air Force, they come out with Lunex, the same kind of model, except they wanted theirs to be a little bit more mobile. And the Soviets at the same time came out with Zvezda, which was, again, to build a subsurface permanent facility on the moon.
I think there is a breakaway civilization that's sharing the world with us. And it's, in some ways, it's been integrated into the United States. So whatever was this renegade Third Reich breakaway civilization, and it may still be operating on its own somehow, but portions of it have been, say, brought in from the cold. And they're part now of some sort of global intelligence operation and network, which must include at least elements of the United States military secret intelligence operations too, I think. And things like Operation Paperclip would have really helped merge those things together. Kind of a global network of secret bases. And even some of them could now be on the moon and Mars even.
I think there is a breakaway civilization. I think it's been around for a long time, but I think there's, like if you study the history of humanity, basically we've had interaction with a very advanced civilization for a long time, and it's been here. If you look at what's going on now, you see that we have very advanced technology in many, many regards. And a lot of it has to do with anti-gravitics. A lot of it has to do with magic, or you could say black magic. A lot of it has to do with mind control technology and geoengineering, and also space navigation.
When it comes to the idea of a secret space program, there's one issue which I think is very important. It doesn't necessarily relate to specifics, but if you think about it, we first landed on the moon, in terms of a manned mission at least, in July 1969. Now, if you look at the way in which every aspect of technology has advanced since then, computers, you know, that were once the size of almost like a car, you know, they're now like a matchbox. You know, the internet, medical technology, everything has advanced to incredible degrees. But we're expected to believe that the same brute force rocketry that sent people to the moon in 1969 is still the only way to get people into space today. And to me, that is totally illogical when every other single aspect of technology has literally gone through the roof in terms of, you know, developments. Why is it then we're still relying upon rockets, brute force engines, and technology that actually really isn't advanced? You know, the Saturn rocket wasn't advanced as such, it was just huge. And it's kind of the same situation today. And I find that very suspicious that we're still supposedly using rocket technology when every other technology has advanced. For that reason, I do think there probably is some sort of covert space program going on.
And this it gets into Gary McKinnon, the fellow who was just a hacker, and he hacked into the Pentagon computers, basically looking to see if he could find for any proof on UFOs. And what he found was rosters and tables of organization for the space fleet and the ships we have that are being made in secrecy. Again, the blending of the space programs, and officers, named all the officers. Even though the Pentagon themselves admit that he didn't do any harm to the Pentagon computers or to national security, but he's just telling tales out of school. They don't like it.
The United States government eventually dropped its case against Gary McKinnon. Perhaps the information was so sensitive they didn't want to risk going to trial. Are there any other hackers who have discovered evidence of a secret space program?
Everybody's heard of Gary McKinnon and the hacking that he did in the early 2000s, looking for information on UFOs, and may actually have stumbled on evidence in terms of documentation related to a secret space program. He reportedly uncovered a listing of military personnel that seemed to be like off-planet personnel. A lot of people, though, don't know about the case of Matthew Bevan, which occurred in the mid-1990s, and in many respects is more important and more intriguing than the Gary McKinnon story. Now, back in the early 1990s, when he was still only a young teenager, but he was a brilliant computer expert back then, Matthew Bevan developed a deep interest in UFOs. And by sort of the mid to late 1990s, when he was sort of 16, 17, he was actually starting to hack. And he hacked into the likes of, for example, NASA, various departments of defense, US Department of Defense programs and sites and formats, etc. And on top of that, he also penetrated Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Now, the one reason we know today why he wanted to do that is because Wright-Patterson has a long history of involvement in the UFO subject. For example, we know that the early acknowledged UFO programs of the US military, like Project Sign, Project Grudge and Blue Book, operated out of Wright-Patterson. However, there have also been a lot of stories and rumours of crashed UFOs and dead aliens stored at Wright-Patterson. So what Bevan wanted to do was to try and essentially find, the treasure, the gold, if you like, that we're all looking for. And he felt that Wright-Patterson would be the place to go looking for records, if you like, online records or in computer systems on alien autopsies, study of alien technology. Now, he didn't actually find that, but what he did find, and what's really interesting, is evidence of some sort of highly advanced space plane, if you like, that was being developed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and was being studied by scientists and military personnel. What happened was that Bevan penetrated Wright-Patterson's systems on a number of occasions, and he said he found it extremely easy to get into. And what he actually found were records on what he described as a split-level, very weird-looking aircraft, kind of like a circular egg-shaped type aircraft, split into two levels. The top compartment was sort of where the pilots would be, where the crew would be, and the bottom part was the propulsion system. And according to the files that he read, the propulsion system, it was powered by an ultra-heavy element, and it could perform incredible speeds. Now, this sort of ties in very much with the story that Bob Lazar spoke about in the late 1980s when he was working out at S4. A lot of people dismiss his story, but what Bevan saw on the computer systems was eerily like the kind of things that Lazar was talking about, say, 7 or 8 years prior to this. Now, when Bevan got into the system and saw these files on what essentially was a secret space plane, he thought he'd got in there and got out without being noticed. But unfortunately for him, that was not the case. But then a few weeks later, when he was working at an insurance company in the Welsh city of Cardiff, his boss came into the office one day and said, "Matthew, there's can you come into the office? We want you to have a look at the computer, that we've got a problem with it. But that was actually a ruse. When he got to the room, there were like 4 guys in black suits, you know, the typical thing. And one of them said, Matthew Bevan, and he said, yes. And he said, my name's Detective Sergeant Simon Janes from Scotland Yard's Computer Crimes Unit, and I'm arresting you for hacking NASA Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and various other US installations and agencies and facilities. And of course, he realised he was in not just hot water, but scalding water.